With the release of Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, a lot of fans think that Nintendo might be finally closing the book on the wild era of Zelda games. This series is well known for reinventing itself every generation, but it's been nearly a decade since the last major shakeup, and Zelda fans are starting to get a little antsy. Now, with the Switch 2 officially here and the series' 40th anniversary right around the corner, Nintendo has the perfect window to show off where Zelda is going next. So today, we're going to be breaking down all of the possibilities, rumors, and what the first true next-gen Zelda could look like. Let's get into it. The most prominent rumor out there right now is one that, honestly, I didn't want to believe for a while. In the very first video on this channel, I shared my theory that the next 3D Mario would release in early 2026. I was wrong. But one of the main arguments I made in that video was that despite the 3D Mario team working on Donkey Kong Bonanza, some major senior developers were completely absent from the production. I initially thought that they were surely working on the next Mario game. But at least in the case of one specific developer, this rumor suggests he's hard at work on a different project. Yoshiaki Koizumi is famous for his work on Link's Awakening, Mario Galaxy, Odyssey, and Ocarina of Time. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Earlier this year, Nintendo released these patents demonstrating a new gameplay mechanic that went viral online. They show a feature which allows the player to lock onto an object in the environment, and when a target has been placed, a familiar-looking fairy starts swirling around it. Completely identical to the way that lock-on worked in Ocarina. I'm sure you've put the pieces together by now. Koizumi's inexplicable absence on the Bonanza team in tandem with these new patents make it seem very possible that he could be working on a remake of Ocarina of Time. And while I'm still not personally convinced, there is a pretty strong argument to be made here. But if this were true, and we really are getting an Ocarina remake in 2026, what would that even look like? Well, the last time Nintendo released Ocarina, it was meant to be a technical showcase of the 3DS's hardware, similar to Mario 64 DS. Thanks to that and Breath of the Wild on the original Switch, I think that Nintendo would use this as an opportunity to showcase just how good the console can look. Now, I'm not suggesting a gritty art style or anything like that, but a high-quality, classic Zelda look would be nostalgic for old fans and look like a distinct departure from the last 10 years of Zelda for new ones. There's an excellent fan-made remake in Unreal Engine that captures what I'm talking about here perfectly. I think we can also expect a handful of new features to set it apart from the other two releases. I don't think it's too far-fetched to assume that these quality-of-life improvements from the 3DS would remain, but I doubt they'd stop there. Load times would likely be reduced or eliminated, and areas on the map could be fully connected like in Breath of the Wild. Voice acting would also be a nice addition, as the comments on my Pokemon video made very clear that can really make or break immersion for general audiences. Lastly, some refinement of combat and camera controls would be an obvious inclusion here. This would be the first time Ocarina would be on just a regular controller, so there's a lot of potential there. My only concern when it comes to this game would be how it's handled and received. It seems like there's a lot working against the potential project, since the original game is treated with a lot of reverence among gamers. It is commonly considered to be one of, if not the greatest game of all time, and if this remake falls short to its predecessor in any way, the discussion around Nintendo would sour to a level we've never seen before. I mean, there are obviously some people who you can just never please, but the quality of an Ocarina of Time remake could really make or break a ton of potential console sales. With all that said though, you should absolutely be taking this rumor with a grain of salt. If I had a nickel for every time an Ocarina of Time remake rumor came around, I'd be able to quit my job and do YouTube full time. Just locking in a confidence level on this potential remake, I'd say about 50%. You know, I'm still not convinced, but there is a pretty solid argument that's being made here, so maybe. I could see it going either way. It would just feel wrong to not at least acknowledge a potential top-down Zelda game, because these are easily my favorites in the series. But I gotta say that I sincerely doubt us traditional Zelda fans are gonna be seeing a new release anytime soon. Development of these games was outsourced to Grezzo in the Switch era, and I see no reason why they'd stop anytime soon. The Link's Awakening remake sold a little over 6 million units, and Echoes of Wisdom, which released last year, did about 4 million, though I do anticipate those numbers to increase this Black Friday. Echoes of Wisdom released 5 years after Link's Awakening and is expected to have taken roughly 3 3 years to develop, as the team spent their first year working on a Zelda Maker game which later became Echoes. It also had a very short reveal to release window, being only a couple months. To me, this indicates that we should not be expecting a reveal or release of the next traditional Zelda game in 2026, and I think that the community generally agrees that the timing simply wouldn't make sense here. But I have seen a number of people make the point that a top-down Zelda would be the perfect way to celebrate the series' 40th anniversary. And while I do agree, I want to quickly clear up a common misconception about these Nintendo anniversaries that YouTubers get so hyped about all the time. Us fans get so wrapped up in speculation that we often fail to realize how anniversary celebrations are purely a marketing tactic. Nintendo would have released all of these games anyway, they just market them for the 40th anniversary if they happen to fall in line. Take Mario's recent one for example. Do you honestly think that Miyamoto went into the studio himself and proudly proclaimed that the only way to celebrate Mario's legacy was with yet another sports title? Of course not, right? That was very clearly already in the pipeline, and now they're just advertising it as a special 40th anniversary celebration game. And the same thing applies to Zelda, as we saw during the 35th. The only products that are purely released to coincide with special occasions like this are physical merchandise such as clothing and toys. So no, even with 2026 arguably being the most optimal time to release a game like this, I am not at all confident. 0% on the confidence meter. If we take a look at every Zelda game on Switch, we can easily split them up into different categories: mainline, top-down, and warriors. But unfortunately, it seems like none of these categories really give us possibilities for what to expect in 2026. We got a mainline game 2 years ago, a top-down game 1 year ago, and a warriors game earlier this month. But there is one game on the list that is completely unaccounted for: Skyward Sword HD. This game is an upscaled port done by Tantalus Media that released back in 2021. Tantalus's work on the Zelda series began back on the Wii U with their port of Twilight Princess in 2016. Meaning that if their release patterns stay the same, we could see another port of a classic 3D Zelda game in 2026, and they could market it the same way they did with Skyward Sword as an anniversary title. In my opinion, this is by far the most likely outcome. I know people have some pretty high hopes for this anniversary, but the Skyward Sword port was the only game released for the 35th, so I see no reason why they would be opposed to continuing that tradition. There is just one little snag though. I have no idea what they would port. The N64 games are too old for a simple upscale. Skyward Sword is completely out of the question for obvious reasons. Tantalus already made a Twilight Princess port, and the big game that launched with GameCube Online was Wind Waker. I suppose they could also do both, like Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, but my gut tells me that they probably won't go that way. I guess it remains to be seen. Overall though, this is more of a personal prediction based completely on release windows and is not backed up by any kind of rumors or leaks or anything like that. Regardless though, because I'm full of myself, I'm gonna give it a 70% on the leakometer. I think I'm really onto something here. Now here's the section I'm sure you all clicked on this video for. Looking at the historical context of Zelda's reveal schedule, 2026 would be the perfect time to show off the next entry in the series. I sincerely doubt we'd see a release for another couple years, but this would be the longest time spent between the release and reveal of mainline entries if they waited until 2027. Unfortunately, we don't have much to go off of when it comes to what we can expect from the next Zelda game, since it will likely be something completely fresh. But I do want to say that I hope Nintendo pulls from the recent criticism their games have been receiving. The Wild Era Zelda games de-emphasizing dungeons in favor of open exploration was a very novel concept in 2017. But as Breath of the Wild aged and Tears of the Kingdom released, we saw an influx of fans reminiscing on how they wished the more traditional Zelda dungeons would make a return. I think that an interconnected overworld map like we've seen in recent years that has some diversions back to the style of dungeons seen in games like Skyward Sword would strike the perfect balance of new and old elements to unite fans of both periods of the series. I'd also like to see visuals that are sort of a mix between Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess. I don't think Zelda will ever return to that ultra gritty look that fans keep begging for, but maybe taking some influence from the way that that game designed its enemies while also keeping a light fantasy atmosphere could create the perfect environment. Link should also wear green again. I am sick of people saying the blue should stick, it should be green. That is the best way to differentiate the Wild Era games from this new, old, whatever era that we're about to enter into. Do not let him wear blue again. I'm tired of it. And get it out of Smash while you're at it. I will say though, they should keep that camera pulled back like in Breath of the Wild. It placed a lot of extra emphasis on the environment in a way that made the game really pop. Basically, I want this next entry to take the best elements of new and old to manufacture the quintessential Zelda experience. But the fact of the matter is that this team is so creative and tight-lipped that we could never realistically guess what they're cooking up. My confidence level that this game will be revealed next year is 85%. We are definitely seeing it. But I added a 15% buffer so that if I'm wrong, you can't make fun of me. If what we've addressed so far doesn't make it obvious enough, we can be certain that something is coming next year. But when it comes down to actually figuring out what that something is, things get dicey. If I had to lock in my predictions for Zelda in 2026, I'd say that we'd get a segment of a regular direct dedicated to the 40th. Here, I think they'd show off the first teaser for the Zelda film, which is confirmed to release in 2027. This will probably be a really quick sneak peek before they announce a mini direct focused on the movie itself like they did for Mario. Then, they'd reveal Twilight Princess for Switch 2 along with some new amiibo to coincide with the release, both of which would drop in 2026. Maybe they could also add some additional merch like clothes and stuff like that. I don't think there's really as much of a market for toys and collectibles with Zelda as there is with Mario, so a talking flower equivalent really wouldn't be applicable here. And lastly, they'd end off with the reveal trailer for the next 3D Zelda game, which will be a departure from the Breath of the Wild style. This would very likely not include a release year and would not come out in 2026. Overall, I don't have huge hopes, but I do think that that lineup would keep fans satisfied while being pretty realistic. But I do hope that I'm wrong and the year is just filled with Zelda game after Zelda game. And given that this is the internet, you probably think I'm wrong anyway. So do me a favor, give me your list for what you're expecting from Zelda in 2026 in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and please remember, believe to achieve.